Hey guys, how are you? Happy Monday. I feel like I haven't spoken to you in ages. It's only been a few days. I would love to know how you guys are doing. So yeah, say hello in the comments if you are here with me live, and if you've come back to watch this on replay, say hello as well so that I know that you were here. How are you doing? I'm doing all right. Had quite a nice restful weekend, which was lovely, and a good Mother's Day virtually with my mom and my sister and my dad and Garth. We did a big video chat for quite a few hours actually. It was quite cool. So yeah, had a lovely weekend. For any moms out there, I hope that you were spoilt yesterday. If you're in South Africa and Mother's Day fell yesterday for you. For any moms to be, congratulations. Spoils are coming your way next year. For anyone who is not a mom yet, like myself, I hope that, yeah, you were able to spoil your mom. And for those of you that don't have a mom and are not a mom yet, well, I'm sending you so much love too. So, yeah, hope you all had a good weekend. Let me know how you are doing. So, I've noticed there's quite a bit of energy in the air at the moment, and this is something I want to speak to today, of people pushing back against all the rules and regulations that are being put in place about the lockdown. And not just in South Africa, in other countries too. And I keep thinking about it in TA terms because it's a very useful language for me it creates a very good picture for me as to what is going on. So I thought, let me share with you in TA terms what is going on, and maybe that'll shed some light for you and might be useful in some way. So I'll try to keep this brief because I could talk about this forever. So first things first, what is TA? TA stands for transactional analysis, which is a form of psychoanalysis that looks at the way that people interact with each other. It's kind of like a social psychology. So it looks at what is happening in me when I am in relationship with you and what is happening between us at a psychological level. It's about human development, about personality development. It's just amazing. When I started studying TA, it really shed light for me on myself and how I had grown and developed over the years. Like what my story was, unhelpful or helpful. It offered me insight into my relationships and the dynamics between myself and other people. And also just like what happens internally in me when I'm having like a certain type of argument or that kind of thing. And so TA has many, many, many models, but there are these few core models which kind of make up the bulk of TA theory. And a lot of people, when you just talk about TA or transactional analysis, the first thing that comes to mind for them is the parent-adult-child model. And they might say, oh, well, I know that, so I know TA. I mean, there are like hundreds of models. And the new ones coming out all the time. It's a growing thing. But parent-adult-child is definitely the core model. So I'm not going to go into massive amounts of detail right now because normally I would take an hour to teach this. So all I want to do is speak about it within the context of the situation that we're in right now, so that hopefully it's helpful for you in getting a bit of a deeper understanding about what's going on. And P.S., if you are with me, please say hi and then I know who's out there. So, and if you have any questions as I go, pop them in the comments, please. So, what is parent-adult-child? Basically, the founder of TA, Dr. Eric Byrne, he was a psychiatrist, and in the 1950s he'd seen like hundreds of thousands of patients, and he realized that there were these common trends in the way that they were thinking, feeling, and behaving. And he was able to kind of group those trends into these three different categories, and he calls them ego states. And so basically, when you are operating from one of these ego states, it means that you are kind of personifying the characteristics of that ego state. So let me explain them and hopefully that'll make more sense. So the first one is the parent ego state. So when you are in your parent mode, there's kind of different ways of doing that. If you think about a typical parent, what are some of the qualities that they possess? On the one hand, parents are very nurturing. They teach us how to love. They look out for us. They protect us. They show us empathy when we're sad. They kind of guide the way. They nurture us. So that's like the one side of parent. On the other side of parent, we have parents create rules in our life. They tell us how to do things and when to do them. They teach us how to brush our teeth and tie our shoelaces and to look both ways before crossing the road. They teach us how to honor our commitments, how to time manage, to do our homework, about responsibility. So they teach us a lot about structure and kind of how to follow the rules, so to speak. So very generally speaking here. So when you think about a parent, there's like these two different sides. There's the real structuring side and there's the real nurturing side. And those both have pluses and minuses. So when it looks right, it teaches us how to be a fully functioning adult, how to have good relationships and how to show up and be responsible. But when it goes not so right, in other words, when it can be overdone, like if nurturing was overdone, it might become more like overprotectedness. So the TA term is marshmallowing. So it's a little bit like if you think about the helicopter moms that you have at the moment, that's the term that's used. They kind of hover over their children and no one can get close. So especially now with younger generations, they don't have to think for themselves because their parents are so busy like looking out for them and thinking for them. So nurturing, it sounds crazy to say, but nurturing can go too far. You do need solid boundaries between when it comes to responsibility, taking responsibility for yourself. So that's the one side. And then the other side, the structuring side of the parent, when that goes too far, it can become dominating. It can become quite critical. So a parent who sets rules and boundaries and teaches about structure is a positive thing because our society has laws and rules and you've got to learn to obey those. But if it's too hard, if it becomes too dominating, then that's going to feel quite stifling. You're going to feel controlled. Sometimes it can be quite critical. It feels like you're not allowed to be who you are, basically. So that's kind of the parent in a nutshell. So each of us has this little parent inside our heads, and when we slip into our parent mode, our parent ego state, we personify these characteristics. So for example, when we become very nurturing, we're kind of using our parent ego state. If we become very structured, if we're assertive and we're putting down boundaries, then we're in our parent ego state. So I hope that makes sense. If there's any questions, please shout or write in the comments. Then let's look at the child ego state. So this ego state is all about the typical qualities of a child. So on the one hand, children are very spontaneous. Children are very curious. They like to have fun. They're very inquisitive. Children like to explore and play around and just laugh and not take life too seriously. So I'm sure you can imagine that if you had a little child inside you, sometimes when you behave or you think or you feel from that child ego state, you personify those qualities. So when you are playing around with a friend and you're laughing and you're being silly, or when you are trying to figure something out and you're getting really curious and creative, when you're spontaneous, like, hey, not right now, let's go on a road trip, but even at home now, you might be getting spontaneous with certain activities that you can do at home. The other side of the child is the child that learns how to operate within society and within relationships. So when you think about all that nurturing and structuring that the parent did, it teaches the child how to show up. And that can be a good thing. So things like learning to obey the laws of the land, it's a good thing to learn to do that, like not to steal and not to murder and all of that stuff, obviously. But that can also go too far. So just as the parent has these positive and kind of negative qualities, so too does the child. So positive child qualities would be what I've just described so far. The more negative qualities would be if a child has become, the positive word is cooperative. They're a cooperative child. They follow the rules. But if that goes too far, if the rules are too strict, and this is the part that's really relevant to us right now, if the rules are too strict, the child goes one of one of two ways. Either they rebel against those rules and they slip into their rebellious child, or they become overly compliant and they stop thinking for themselves and they just do what they're told. Which can be problematic because they lose their autonomy in that case. Same by with the spontaneous child, if that goes too far, it can become quite immature and self-centered, and everything is me, 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 and this is what I want, and I don't really care what anybody else wants. So when we are in our child mode, we're either personifying those positive qualities, or we can slip into the negative ones. And I don't really like using the word negative, but basically the unhelpful qualities. And then the third mode of being, the third ego state, is the adult. So the adult is basically, so the parents and the child is kind of in response to what has happened to you in your past. So what creates your parent ego state, your parent persona, your parent way of being, is what you witnessed growing up from the big people around you. Primarily your parents or your caregivers, whoever raised you, but also any other influences that were around you at the time, like your teachers, your schooling system, your culture, your religion, your like society, you know, the TV shows you used to watch, like all of that stuff contributes to your parent persona, just as it does to your child. And with your child, it's a lot more about the emotions that you experienced growing up. So when people talk about your inner child and how you need to do inner child healing, I don't know if you've heard that term, it's quite popular, that's kind of what it is. When you slip into your child mode, the unhelpful parts of your child mode, a lot of that is the trauma and the hurt that you experienced growing up in response to all the different things that were happening. So the adult is not about the past. The adult is about the here and the now. It's about, let me look at what's happening right now and let me evaluate. Let me take into account all my past experience and my wisdom and my knowledge and my skills and my ability to look at the bigger picture, and let me make an informed decision on how I want to proceed. So kind of an immature child might just react to a situation because they're feeling unsafe. A dominating parent might react to a situation by trying to really control it because they're feeling out of control. An adult would pause, take a breath, and decide, how do I want to go forward? So, ideally you want to be in your adult, most of the time, or you always want to at least have a foot in your adult. And put a foot in your parent when you need to do the nurturing and the structuring, and put a foot in your child when you want to be spontaneous and curious and have fun, or when you need to follow the rules, to keep you safe. But always keep a foot in the adult so that you are grounded in the present moment and you can use all of your wisdom. You can really integrate all the knowledge that you've amassed in your life, and you can make decisions that are guided by your authentic truth, by your inner wisdom, so to speak. So I hope that makes sense. Let me know. The parent, the adult, and the child. These are our different ways of showing up in the world. And I think from what I've described, you might recognize that there might be one or two where you typically show up more. So for example, when I first discovered TA, I used to show up as a dominating parent quite a bit. I was quite controlling, a fair bit of other people, but also within myself. I was very perfectionist, a little bit OCD, things had to be done a certain way in order for me to feel safe, excuse me. So I used to personify the controlling parent quite a bit. Now, having done a shit ton of work, I've let go of that quite a lot, and now I find myself sitting more in adult, where I'm able to have awareness in the moment of what is going on within me and around me, and I'm able to make a decision about how I want to show up based on what I'm observing, and what I know and what I feel. Obviously not all of the time, because I am still a human being and none of us are ever going to get it right all the time. So I find I do spend a fair bit in my adult. I also step into my child a fair bit, where I like to be curious. I love learning. I get really curious with my learning. So I think that brings out a lot of child. And nurturing. I'm such a nurturing person. Like, I often played the mom type of thing. So I have to watch myself that doesn't go too far, where I'm taking on too much responsibility for other people's emotional wellness and not letting them do it for themselves. Yeah, because you can support someone without doing it for them. So there's definitely a line there, and I have to watch out for myself that I don't cross that line. So this is very inviting for me. I love looking after people. So yeah, from what I've described, I'd love to know if you're with me live or if you're watching on the replay. Just put it into the comments. I'll come back and I'll see it. Where do you think you typically lie? Like, where do you spend most of your time? Is it in some of those aspects of the parent, some of the aspects of the child, or do you feel like you've done like good solid work and you're showing up in your adult, majority of the time? Let me know. And by the way, there's no shame in wherever you are, because it's all learning experience. And that's the whole point, is you want your adult to kind of like grow and pulsate and constantly be expanding. It's a little bit like your consciousness would be another word for it. You want to be constantly integrating all these experiences that you're having to become this like fully formed, fully functional. Well, you'll never be full. It's always ongoing. There's never an end. The consciousness is always expanding. So there's no shame in acknowledging, hey, I'm turning up in one of these unhelpful places. I'm behaving in this really unhelpful way. There's no shame in that. Part of the journey is accepting where you're at without judgment. So I'd love to know how this is relevant to right now. What I was speaking about at the beginning of this live is that with all the rules and restrictions that are being put in place, which role do you think the government is typically playing right now? So I'm going to answer for you. Controlling parent, right? So remember, there's the structured parent, which I think is how it started out, where it was like, we're going to put this lockdown in place. It's for your own good. We're trying to preserve life. It was really positive. It was about looking out for us, so a bit of nurturing there, but it was really that structuring parent. It was saying this is for our own good. And we all bought into that. So I think, well, not all of us maybe, but for myself personally, I can say I really bought into that, and I felt like such a relief that I didn't have to make a decision about whether it was okay to go out or not, because I was being told what to do. So I slipped into my cooperative child, where I was like, no problem, I'm happy to listen to the rules. Now what's happened is the longer this situation has gone on, the more restrictive it's actually become. And now what I'm feeling is that the government has slipped over the line from structuring parent to dominating parent, controlling parent. And what that invites in me, rather than being relieved to follow the rules, I find myself slipping into rebellious child, as I'm sure many of you guys do too. Now I want to not fight back, I want to push back. Now I want to say, well, screw you. Why should I only walk between this time and that time? And why shouldn't, why should people be at home starving when they could go out to work and earn money? Like, the reality is most of us are going to get this bloody disease anyway. So, let's get on with life. And I know it is so complicated, so I'm really not inviting a debate on that, unless you want to have a respectful one, in which case go for it. But I know it's super complicated, but what I'm trying to point out to you, in the hopes that it might be beneficial for you, is what's going on inside of me. So a controlling parent invites me to step into my rebellious child and go, screw you. And that brings up a lot of anger. And I'm watching this unfold within me, and I'm watching this unfold in the media and in my, network of people. And I don't know what the solution is, but I think we need to find a way to get back into our adults, to really get grounded in our present, in our authentic selves, and to figure out what is right for me, what works for me. and to find a way to feel okay even when there's a lot of not okayness going on around us. In TA, the word okay means everything. Like, I feel like if you say, how are you? Oh, I'm okay, it feels like a bit of a lukewarm kind of word. But in TA terms, okayness is what you're striving for. Okayness is like, I'm feeling autonomous. I'm feeling in control of myself or in charge of myself. I know how I feel. I'm killing it at awareness. I'm making decisions that are a real reflection of who I am. I'm showing up in a way that is honoring my authentic self. I'm listening to my inner wisdom. I'm behaving with respect for myself and for other people, very importantly. So we're striving for okayness. So if you find yourself falling into that category of rebellious child like I've been, my invitation to you is figure out what adult feels like to you. Figure out what okayness feels like to you and lean into that. Whatever it is that helps you feel good, whether it's exercise or yoga or meditation or having calls with friends. It doesn't always have to be that self-reflective work. Sometimes it's just about having fun to get you back into your body or back into the present moment or back into feeling really okay. So whatever it is for you, and there'll be multiple ways, but figure out a few of them and start practicing them and get into a good feeling place, because it's the only thing, I really believe, it's the only thing that's going to help you make it out of this feeling good. Basically, it's about emotional regulation. It's about making decisions. How do you want to show up? If you're happy being rebellious child, then by all means go for it and continue. But there's a reason that rebellious child is considered to be outside of okayness. It's like there's this little, I can't show you the model, but there's this box around, this okay box around the adult and the positive parts of the parent and the positive parts of the child. And outside of that okayness box is the dominating parent, the overprotective parent, which is called the marshmallowing parent, the immature child, the one that's all me, the rebellious and the overly compliant child. Those are all outside of okayness, because when you are slipping into those modes of being, you no longer have a foot in your adult. You're no longer grounded in the present moment, and you're living into archaic ways of being. So that story, those limiting beliefs, that's why this whole situation is so triggering for many of us, because it's bringing up stuff, all our baggage to the surface, and it's inviting you to either super control everything, controlling parent, I did a bit of that, or to totally just rebel and be like, it's just the flu, come on guys, or however it is that you're showing up. So yeah, let me know. Was this helpful? I would love to know. If you have any questions about it, let me know. If you'd like to know more about it, let me know. I'll happily organize a webinar where we can have actual dialogue and talk about it, and go into it with some great depth, and also know talk about how it actually applies to you. Because it's all good and well learning, hearing some information, but until you apply it to your own life, that's how you really ground the knowledge. So yeah, let me know. I'm happy to organize something. Cool. That's it for today. Yeah, hope that was helpful. Hope that you're all doing okay. And if there's anything you need, please shout. I will see you later for Good Night Gratitude. Otherwise, I will see you tomorrow morning for a live morning meditation. Been a while since I went live for morning meditation, so looking forward to that. And thank you so much. Sending you love. Cool. Bye, guys.